Today I want to share something quick and simple. We're going to take basic chords like this and turn them into this. By the way, free music theory handbook and free backing tracks at the link at the top of the description. So what exactly was I playing in that example there? Well, it's something that we're gonna call spread thirds. I don't know if that's the official name, but that's what we're gonna call it for the sake of this lesson. And simply put, this is just an interval. So when we play major and minor chords, we play the root note. So that's the note that shares the same name as the chord. So in a G major chord, it's the G note. Then we play a major or minor third, depending on if it's a major chord or a minor chord. And then we play a fifth. Those are the three notes that make up our basic major and minor chords. So when I say that we're playing thirds, that just means that we are playing the root and the third. So when we're playing a major chord, we're playing the root and the major third. When we're playing a minor chord, we're just playing the root and the minor third. So pretty simple so far. But there's something else that we're gonna do that's gonna make it sound even more interesting. Because if I were to just play the thirds, let's say of a G major chord and then an A minor chord. For the G major, for the A minor, right? So root, major third, root, minor third. And that's all well and good and useful in its own way, but what we're gonna do is we are going to spread our interval apart, basically by creating an extra octave of distance. That's why we call it a spread third. So now, instead of playing root third there, we're gonna play it an octave above. So we get this. Same thing when we play our minor. And it creates this really beautiful, simple little chord. There's a very popular song called Hold Back the River by James Bay, and he uses that. That right there is just spread thirds. So when it comes to guitar, whether I'm learning something new myself or I'm teaching something to somebody else, I always like to make connections to something that I already know. In this case, we're gonna be connecting this to bar chords, and you don't need to be able to play bar chords. You just need to kind of understand what the shape of a bar chord is. So let's start with the very first shape. I'm gonna start with a G major bar chord. This is the standard first bar chord shape most people learn, right? And you don't need to be able to do this perfectly. You just have to understand the shape. And all I'm gonna do is isolate the root and then that third an octave up. So the root and the third, those two notes. All I have to do is play those two notes. And you might notice it's hard to kind of strum through because you'll have to mute every other note. So I'd suggest using your fingers if you can, like this. I like to use my pick and my finger. This might take a little bit of practice, but totally fine if you just want to work on that. And since this is all just based on a bar chord, that means that we can just move this anywhere we want on the fretboard to play any other major chord. So if we move it up here, that's a B note right there. So that would represent a B major chord. Shape number 2 will just be based on the minor bar chord variant. So if I were to play an A minor bar chord, well, I'm just gonna isolate the root and the minor third because it's a minor bar chord, just like that. And there's a few different ways you can play it. You'll see I play with my thumb a lot. If you can't do that, that's fine. You can play it like this or like this. That's fine. So with the thumb, it's nice because you can go from here to there like that, but whatever's comfy for you works. Once again, I can slide this around anywhere on the fretboard to play any other minor chord I want as well. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing, but using bar chord shapes that are rooted on the A string. So bar chords like this, right? And all we're gonna do again is find the root note. So this is from a C major chord, and we're gonna find that third an octave up, right there. Right, again, if I were to play the third that's closest, what we'd call closed position, right? But instead, a little bit more interesting. And then finally we get to shape number 4, which is just based on the minor chord variant. So let's go up here to the E minor chord. That bar chord, we're just gonna be isolating the root and the minor third, just like that. Again, with these shapes, you can move them anywhere, and as long as you know the name of the root note that you're on, that is the chord that you are playing. So why would you use chord shapes like these over something like a bar chord or an open chord? Well, first and foremost, it's a great way to start learning and understanding the importance of intervals. Typically, newer guitar players aren't thinking so much about notes and intervals and how they're interacting with the music as much as they're just thinking about the shapes that they're playing. Practicing something like this is really going to help you to start understand the inner workings of chords and harmony and music in general. Now, another use case that's even more practical is when you are playing with other musicians in a band, and especially if you're playing with another guitar player. So if that guitar player is playing something like this, typically, you would not want to play the exact same thing because then you're just stepping on each other's toes. So a lot of guitar players will maybe opt for bar chords instead, slightly different voicings of the same chords. But you're really taking up still a lot of the same sonic space. So what you could do instead is you could outline those chords with these spread thirds. So immediately, that's going to separate what you're doing from what the other guitar player is doing. So this can be a really great tool for just starting to write your own guitar parts beyond just playing chords. And to take that one step further, you could do everything an octave up, let's say, right? So rather than doing this, you could go all the way up here to this G, right? And all of a sudden you're way out of the way. Now you have even more musical options without having to think too hard because it's connected to something that you already know. The last thing I want to do is just show you how you can maybe use this in your own songwriting if you want. So we've been in the key of G major for most of this lesson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can play every chord in the key of G major with these shapes. So if we start on a G, our one chord, it would look like this. Then we go to our A minor for our 2 chord. Then we go to our B minor for our 3 chord. Now we could stay in this area and go up to our 4 there for our C, or we could go back up here. Exactly the same thing. So there's C, our 4 chord, D, our 5 chord, D major specifically. Then we go up to E, which is the minor chord, our 6 chord. And then because we're only playing roots and thirds, our 7 chord is actually not weird because the 5th is where it gets funny and we have to play a diminished chord. So we can just play a nice little F sharp minor there, right? Just root and minor third before returning to our G major, climbing up the whole octave. So you can keep going. Once you get comfortable in this key, you can just start mixing and matching and creating your own chord progressions, right? Then once you get the hang of playing in this key, you can start moving things around and working on playing in other keys. The great thing is that these shapes are just based on bar chords, which means that the shapes don't change when you want to play in other keys. There's a concept that I teach called chord roadmaps. That's essentially a framework that you can apply to the fretboard. And whenever you want to play in a different key, you just have to shift that up or down the fretboard. So it's really easy to remember because the shapes don't change. The great thing is that these spread thirds fit perfectly into that whole concept. So if that's something that you're interested in learning, I'll have the lesson for you up in the middle of the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.